It was a sloppy game versus the shorthanded Sixers that was way too competitive until the Heat turned it on midway through the fourth quarter, taking control to get the win. We'll break down the game and the big performances, as well as what this means for Miami's playoff standings in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day for daily content on the Heat. Click that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast app, and make sure you're signed up for our newsletter, the Locked On Heat newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Heat newsletter. Have a great show for you today. We're going to hand out credit cookies in a second and ask the big question: will the Heat be better next season? First, we are recording this on Monday night after the Heat's win over the 76ers. 117-105 is the final score. No Bam, no Andrew Wiggins for Miami in this one. Tyler Herro did return from his one-game absence. The Sixers were without Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and a million of other guys. So skeleton crew for them as they continue to try to move their way down the Eastern Conference standings. But this was, despite the injuries, a tie game for three quarters. The Heat then go ahead and outscore the Sixers 34-22 in the fourth quarter. And this win puts Miami in position to play for a potential home court advantage in the 9-10 game against the Bulls if they beat the Chicago Bulls in Chicago on Wednesday. Also a key game to watch for Heat fans interested in such a thing. Chicago-Cleveland on Tuesday night. So the win keeps the Miami's hopes of moving up to 9 or maybe even moving up to 8 alive here. I want to talk about the Kel'el Ware part of this here in a second, but before we get to that, the chances of moving up to 9 or 8 in the East still alive after this game. David, would moving up in the standings change the way that you think about Miami's chances in the playoffs?
No, not necessarily, because I think they've been such an inconsistent team. Even tonight's performance kind of shows that this was a win that, for whatever reason, and I understand the loss of Bam is a significant one because of everything he does defensively and all the glue that he provides in terms of keeping things steady and making them appear to be at least a semblance of a team. And with him out, you could tell early on, and for most of the game, that they were kind of discombobulated and not really prepared defensively, especially for a team that they haven't scouted against, that they're not familiar with. You have big performances from Quentin Grimes. You have big performances from Lonnie Walker, the fourth. And it was just something that maybe this team was unprepared for, which is, shouldn't be the case because, you kind of have to know who you're facing on a night-to-night basis, but there are mitigating factors here. And yet you're tied with them until the 8.5-minute mark of the fourth quarter. That's not good. And yet we also saw them be really, really good against some decent teams and also against some bad teams, with which Philadelphia certainly won during their 6-game win streak. And yet before that, they had lost 10 games in a row. So we've talked about this all season. We don't know what version of this team we're going to get on a nightly basis. And that's what makes the play-in tournament such a dangerous proposition, because you might get the really worst version of this team that can't hit a three, that can't pass the ball, that can't defend at a high level. And next thing you know, you're going to get blown out by the Hawks or the Bulls or whoever you wind up facing in that play-in tournament. But you also could get the team that really beat the pants off of the Golden State Warriors or beat Boston very well, or competed against the Cleveland Cavaliers and competed against the Memphis Grizzlies, etc. Like, you could get a very good version of this team on a night-to-night basis. So regardless of who their opponent is, I don't know what their chances are going to be. And I know that's not the answer you're probably looking for, but I think it's also the reality of what this team is they can beat any of those teams in the play-in tournament. They could even make a first-round series against the Cleveland Cavaliers competitive if they're playing their very best and they're healthy. But there's no guarantee that that's going to be the case. And I don't know whether or not I could predict that, because maybe Wiggins doesn't come back. Maybe he's a shell of himself once he does come back. Maybe Bam has to miss time, etc. Like there could be a lot of different factors here. So I'm not concerned about the opponent so much as I have to focus on what version of Miami we see on a nightly basis or from a game-to-game basis. And that being the case, it doesn't really matter where they end up in the standings. Although you'd like them to continue to win out and build off that and have the kind of confidence that we saw them have during the 6-game win streak, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate into whatever play-in tournament games they have.
Yeah, we were talking maybe a week ago during the 6-game win streak. Boy, it looks like this team is peaking right at the right time. And then a couple injuries happen, and now it looks like, oh, maybe they're not peaking. Now it looks like they're limping back into the play-in tournament, which has been the story for this team over the last couple of seasons, and then the third one, including this one. I don't know. Like, in terms of the consistency part of this team, we talk about this all the time with superstar players. The superstar power, right? The superpower that makes a player a superstar is consistency. It's not the heights that these players have. Corey Brewer scored 50 points in a game. He wasn't a superstar.
Wow.
You know, it's doing it night in and night out. The superstar superpower is consistency. And the same applies to teams. Good teams, the superpower behind the good teams, behind the Thunder, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Celtics, is their consistency.
Right.
That's the superpower. Anybody can win a game. The Wizards won games this year. The Wizards have blown teams out this season. They stink, right? Nobody in Washington is looking at that game like, boy, you know, we blew out that one team that one time in January. We should be a little bit better, shouldn't we? Like, nobody's looking at the Wizards that way. And the Heat are weird, and these 500 teams are all kind of weird because sometimes they do it and sometimes they don't. But the superpower is the consistency. And so they don't have that superpower. And they haven't had that superpower in the regular season for 3 years now. Their superpower in the playoffs was a little bit different. I don't think they have that superpower this year. And I'm not even talking about necessarily Jimmy Butler, although that's a big part of it. But there's more than that too, right? Right now, this is a young team. Pluck Jimmy Butler off this team the way that we just did. This is a young team. Bam is 27. We think about him as this vet because he's been on 2 finals teams. And certainly he's very experienced. And I think he is, you can consider him a veteran, but he's only 27 years old. This guy's just sort of starting his physical prime, right? Tyler Herro is maybe in his prime now, maybe just at the very beginning of it, kind of starting to dip a toe into his prime. I don't even know. This is not a veteran team by any stretch. And so, yeah, when we look and zoom out and say, okay, well, if this team was to move up to 9 or even 8, and I only include 8 in here because mathematically they're not eliminated from it, but they're not getting to that 8th spot. We all know that. So we're talking about a team that's going to end up in the 9-10 game. We're talking about home court advantage in 1 game. It doesn't matter, man. And I see myself, like, I had this whole thing prepared if the Heat were going to lose this game to Philadelphia, being like, best case scenario, who cares? Tank out the rest of the season. These games don't matter for Miami down the stretch here. But whatever. I guess you get 1 game at home against the 10 team if you end up getting this 9 seed, and maybe that sets you up to travel and beat the loser of the 7-8 matchup, and you back your way up into the playoffs and lose to Cleveland or Boston, or lose to Cleveland, I guess, in that scenario. But I don't know that the seeding matters much to me, although I guess you got to give credit to the Heat. They're at least playing for something here, and they care about it seems like.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. I think if they didn't care, they would have just rolled over when Philadelphia had tied everything up midway through the 4th quarter. Like, again, I was thinking it was 88 all with 8.5 minutes left.
Are we sure Philadelphia didn't roll over?
No, I think Quentin Grimes was still doing his thing. I think Miami tightened their defense a little bit, and you started getting some timely shots from Kyle Anderson and Duncan Robinson. Yeah, I mean, there was clear intent for them to find a way to win. They weren't just taking bad shots or they weren't coughing the ball up. They played better during that stretch than they had for the previous 40 minutes. It just, it was not great. And again, easier to do against a bad team. And you see that, like with Philadelphia, as much of a gutsy performance as it was from them, something that pains me to admit, they also, because they're not good, they're not consistent, they're not deep, they hit those good performances, and then Miami punches them, and they're kind of like, oh, okay, well, we're really not going to try that much after this point, and then eventually they kind of just let Miami run roughshod on them, and that's what a lot of teams have done against the Sixers group all year. So, it's I don't know what to make of this Heat team. I really don't. I contend that they can be good enough to challenge whoever they face.
What does that mean,
in the
challenge?
playoffs. A competitive series. I think it would feel like a moral victory because it's not going to result in winning the series. But if you go up against Cleveland, I kind of like Miami's chances of making it competitive. I could see this going 6 or 7 games against Cleveland.
Okay, I can't. But maybe
You
the
think
games
Cleveland's going to beat them, like sweep them? Gentlemen
they probably
sweep?
won't, I don't know. I think the Heat would win one game. Does that count as
Healthy?
challenging them? I don't know.
No, it's not.
Yeah. 6 games would be a challenge. 5 games is a gentleman sweep. Yeah, I don't look. I would love to be surprised. I don't. I think the Cavs are awesome, and I think that they've been playing poorly lately because these games don't matter. But this is a team that has
Sure.
2 different 15-game win streaks. In terms of winning multiple games in a row, no team has been better at that in this season than Cleveland. So I just have a hard time seeing it. But we did also on the East Squad show talk that, and that'll come out later on Locked On Heat feeds on Tuesday afternoon. But we had the whole conversation about who's the East play-in team that the top teams would least want to face. Cleveland and Boston, obviously. And my answer is still the Miami Heat. You've got Eric Spoelstra. You've got a team that's going to be physical. You've got a guy like Bam Adebayo who's going to muck up everything that you want to do offensively, and that's just annoying for teams to deal with, especially in the first round. They're like, we have to deal with maybe one of the best defenders in the league and maybe the best coach in the league in the first round. Like, that's not exactly what we thought we were signing up for when we had one of the best records in the league. But I don't think any of these teams are really going to. I just think Boston and Cleveland are so much better than everybody else in the East. But go ahead.
Well, no,
Quick,
but I mean, we should at least mention the consensus though was that Miami was not the team that those top contenders wanted to face. I thought that
the most of the people on the show thought it was going to be Chicago, and I'm like, come on, really?
Like, there's this assumption that Chicago has been. I mean, as the broadcast pointed out, they've won 12 of their last 16 games. They have been very good to close out the season, and they were really bad for most of the regular season, and they've just been really good of late, which is why Miami finds himself in this quote unquote battle against the Bulls for the play-in tournament. Wednesday's game against Chicago is not necessarily an easy one for Miami. So it's
must watch, man. It's one of the biggest games left of the season. Wednesday night. Are more people going to be tuned in for Dallas's return to, or Luka's return to Dallas, or the big 9-10 everything hangs in the balance game?
Well, I could say one game is probably going to be more competitive than the other one, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be the Miami-Chicago one.
Fair. That's a good point. We're going to hand out credit cookies after this. Plus, is Kel'el Ware a lock for first team All-Rookie? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's show is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%. Plus, you also get 4% APY in your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate subject to change, and 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for the first year from first match, and it must keep the funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate. Claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Ariete Hospitality. Hey, Miami Heat fans, are you looking to elevate your game day experience? There's not many opportunities left. Check out the two must-visit spots just steps away from the Kaseya Center in downtown Miami. First up, we've got Brasserie Laurel, a culinary gem in the Miami World Center, recommended by the Michelin Guide. Laurel offers an upscale French brasserie experience, blending old world charm with modern flair. Whether you're enjoying delicious bites or sipping craft cocktails, it's the perfect spot before or after the game. And don't miss their happy hour specials every day from 5 to 7 p.m. And next, head over to El Vecino, a sophisticated cigar bar with a laid-back vibe. It's the ideal pre- or post-game hangout, or even a place just to watch the game. Enjoy exceptional cocktails, bites, and a welcoming atmosphere for all, including non-smokers. They've got a happy hour too, daily from 4 to 7 p.m. Both of these incredible venues are part of the Ariete Hospitality Group, known for elevating Miami's dining scene. Don't miss out on these game-changing spots. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Locked On Heat. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Well, David, it's another Miami Heat win, which means it's time for the tastiest segment of Locked On Heat. It is time to hand out credit cookies. We have 10 cookies to hand out. Who's getting our credit cookies today?
Well, you mentioned him earlier, and I know that he's going to be a focal point of our conversation in this episode, but I've got to start with Kel'el Ware, who I thought was really a presence in the interior with Bam Adebayo out. You knew the brunt was going to fall on him to provide some kind of semblance there and provide a rebounding edge for Miami against an undersized Philadelphia team, although Adam Bona, the rookie, who we thought might be a good second-round pick for the Miami Heat when we were doing our draft analysis. He wound up having a pretty game himself. You did like him a lot. I thought he was a little slow, but he's wound up being a pretty explosive potential player there. So, but this is about Ware, and he was great. He gets 3 credit cookies to go along with his 19 points. He was 8 of 16 from the floor, and most importantly, his 17 rebounds, I think, really made the difference. I talked about this and what we wanted to see from him to close out the year, and I wanted this kind of a breakout performance because at that point in time, I think this was before the 6-game win streak, he was still a little shaky on the rebounding. Like, you could tell he was getting boxed out or he was in the right position. His improvement over the course of the last second half of the season has been phenomenal. I think in terms of just understanding where positioning is, what to do, how to use his length and size against smaller opponents, how to be able to position himself in the right way to be able to get that rebound down. And even one on the offensive end, but also the defensive end, and like just everything that he's been doing in terms of his rebounding has been phenomenal. And those 17 boards was a historically good performance for him as a rookie.
Yeah, he's been a lot better on the boards lately. I mean, obviously he has this game. He does only have 6 rebounds against Milwaukee, against a big front court with Brook Lopez and Giannis, but he also only played 19 minutes in that game, mostly because of foul trouble. But, you go per 36 minutes, that's still over 10 rebounds per game, or 10 rebounds in that game if you go per 36 minutes, 15 rebounds before that. So he has been better rebounding lately. For me, it takes a little bit too much of a coaching staff sort of begging him to rebound a little bit. But hey, that's the job of the coaching staff. That's the point of the development. And he has been getting the message and being better on the boards lately. He's better in the dunker spot. He makes himself more available. He's just been more physical and active on and around the glass, which is the biggest thing for him. And, he also does something, I don't know, once a week that makes you just makes your jaw drop. I mean, in this game, he has this crazy one-handed put-back dunk where it looks like he's levitating over 2 different 76ers players, and you're just like, what is this guy athletically? It still feels like I said, he does one thing a week where you're just like, wow, but it still feels like we're just scratching the surface of what he can do, because when he really starts to understand the game and be as active and as physical as you want him to be, that athleticism is only going to pop even more and more often. And
I agree.
That's going to be the crazy thing with him. And you talk to people around the league, a lot of people really like Kel'el Ware. Like, they are seeing the vision with him. And I wasn't even a Ware guy going into the draft. But everything changes when you're drafted by the Heat, where it's just like, oh, well, now, there's just so much clay to mold here. They're going to figure it out. It's one of the best player development staffs in the league. And now you see a guy like Ware have a lot more fans around the league than I think he had during the pre-draft process. But that kind of leads me to my next question here. If we can side ramp off of credit cookies for a second here. Is Kel'el Ware a lock in your mind for first team all rookie?
That's a tough one. I mean, you've got Stephon Castle, Reza Shea. We talked about Alex Sarr kind of popping of late. I think you feel like he's kind of dropped off a little bit, and as a number 1 pick or one of the top 2 picks, you feel like maybe he's getting a lot more attention, and where partly. He struggled at times. He didn't get much playing time until later in the season.
Is all rookie positionless also?
I think it is.
It has to be. I think it's always been.
So is he considered one of the top 5 rookies?
So
Probably.
I would have Castle, Rizichet, Jalen Wells, Alex Sarr, and Ware. And I don't. That's not even in order. I just have those 5. And
Yeah, sure.
maybe you can make an Edie argument, but I think it would be an Edie versus Sarr argument. I don't think it would be an Edie versus Ware argument,
Yeah, that's the interesting question there. And that being the case,
or even an Edie versus Wells argument. 2 Grizzlies.
yeah, yeah. But I feel like it would come down to the big men, and I think Sarr against again as being a high draft pick, he'd probably get attention. Edie being the National College Player of the Year, he'd probably get a little bit more attention, and then Ware unfortunately would kind of fall a little bit under the radar. So we'll see how it plays out. But I would say he's a strong candidate, but I wouldn't call him a lock.
I'm gonna guess he'll make first team all rookie, but you're right. It's probably too much to say that he's a complete lock because you never know how voters are going to vote on these things, especially for an underwhelming rookie class that nobody's really paying attention to anyway. All right, so he's got 3 credit cookies. Where else are we going?
We also got 3 credit cookies going to the leading scorer, Tyler Herro. He's got 20 points on 8 of 14. He wasn't the leading scorer tonight. He's the team's leading scorer in general. 8 of 14 from the floor. He was really efficient, really doing some nice work. 5 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal. The reason why I think the performance was a little underwhelming was that he also had 7 turnovers. But considering he was coming back from injury and there was no Bam Adebayo there to kind of take the focus of whatever Philadelphia could muster defensively, I think he was really effective and for most of his spots there. 33 minutes, he hit some big shots down the stretch. I really liked his performance overall, so I gave him 3 credit cookies.
Yeah, just of the turnovers, 3 of them were in the first quarter. It was just it felt like he just forgot to tie his shoe to start the season or to start the game, right? He was sort of like fumbling all over the place. And then he really locked in as the game went on, just 2 turnovers in the entire second half to go along with those 12 points. He was great. And he had some really nice takes in this one. He's really starting to figure out how to use his pace in the open floor. Again, just all the things that we're talking about in terms of his overall development, the physicality with which he's playing, and all these things. Wasn't the best Tyler Herro game. Nothing's going to come off this game and make it to the highlight reel probably. But you talk about consistency. This is it. This is what makes Tyler Herro special. So good game overall for him, deserving of the cookies.
I've also got 2 credit cookies going to Duncan Robinson. He was a little shaky for most of the game, or early off at least, but offensively, he really came on late. He was 7 of 8 overall, 5 of 6 from 3-point range, had 2 rebounds and assists, and the block shot finished with a plus 16 plus minus rating for his 21 points. I think it was a big game for him, and they needed that performance. And you want him to get that kind of confidence boost because Miami's so much more effective when he's out there. Alec Burks, got the start. And he was solid in his performance, but having that offensive firepower and Duncan Robinson, it's just look, to me, there was a problem. I texted you early in the game when you had concerns about him defensively. I said, yeah, he's played bad defensively, but guess what? His offense has also been pretty assy as well. And I think most of it was without Bam out there, he just wasn't getting good looks. And it's like, what do you I made this complaint before. He doesn't seem to remember how tall he is, that he can get that shot over pretty much anybody. And it's just like he needs his perfect positioning in order to get the shot off. Oh, eventually he wound up getting that shot. Whether he was on the run or whether or not he was left wide open on the perimeter, he had those looks available to him and he was knocking those down. That's all he needs because he's that good a shooter. Yeah. It's just my concern was when he's not getting those easy looks, can he still find a way to generate them or get better looks at the rim? And that was the case later on in the game. But early on, it was not an easy process for him.
Yep. 5 of 6 from 3-point range in this game. He was left wide open inexplicably several times by Philadelphia's quote-unquote team here. But Ware had the highlight of the game. Duncan Robinson probably had the highlight 1B where he has the block shot that leads to a 3 on the other end. Just classic Duncan Robinson 3-and-D stuff as we've come to expect from him, I suppose.
Yes, you always expect to get that block shot on one end and the 3
right, yes, exactly.
I've got 1 credit cookie going to Davion Mitchell. Not a great offensive performance from him, although he did have 12 points. But he also had 9 assists, something that we haven't seen. That's a high for him in a Heat uniform.
9 assists to 1 turnover. Love that ratio. Yep.
That is phenomenal. And of course, providing mostly solid defense as well, although he was victimized a little bit. He also had 5 fouls as Quentin Grimes was able to get his shot going inexplicably as well.
How many did you have for him? I'm sorry, I missed that number.
Just 1. That's 1.
Okay.
So 1 credit cookie left. And this is a tough one. I wound up awarding it to Pelle Larsson, who I think had a bounce back game after a subpar performance against the Bucks. But you could make a strong case that Kyle Anderson should probably get it based on his overall positive impact. Anderson finished with 8 points, Larsson with 12. I think maybe he just had the better overall game in terms of his offensive production. And that's why I gave it to Pella. But I think Anderson deserves a shout out at the very least.
I think you have to give it to Anderson. I thought Pella was 8 points in the first quarter. That was nice. It ended up being pretty immaterial to the game overall, where I thought Kyle Anderson's bench production was really important. He was a plus 22 in this game. I mean, the best line, and he was playing backup center with Bam out. I think you got to move the cookie.
I can't make too strong an argument. So what, Slow-mo, you get the credit cookie, buddy.
There we go. We've got some listener questions that I want to get to after this, including whether or not the Miami Heat will be better next season, or is it going to be a fourth straight year in the play-in tournament? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your physical health. But traditional in-person therapy can be expensive, often ranging from $100 to $250 per session. And that's where BetterHelp comes in. With online therapy, you get quality care at a price that makes sense, saving you time and money. It's so convenient to be able to talk to your therapist online. I know some therapists provide consultation that way, but BetterHelp, that's their strength. Video therapy sessions that are set to your schedule. That's what makes it so convenient. It's not just for life's toughest moments either. It can help with everyday stress, learning how to set boundaries, or even developing positive coping skills for whatever you might be dealing with. Having access to support when you need it can make a big difference. Your well-being is worth it. Go visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA today, and you get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Make sure to visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The playoff race is heating up for the Heat as the season winds down. Can they secure a playoff or a play-in spot? Stay in the know with Locked On Heat, the Locked On Heat podcast newsletter, and get a chance to win one of these amazing prizes by subscribing at LockedOnDaily.com. You can win one of these great prizes, a $2,500 Best Buy gift card to upgrade your sports cave setup, a $300 Game Time gift card, or a $200 gift card to Fanatics. Sign up between April 7th and April 30th of this year to be entered. Our Heat newsletter delivers real-time updates, expert analysis, and playoff insights tailored for you. Subscribe now for free to the Locked On Heat podcast newsletter and stay ahead of the season stay ahead as the season unfolds. Subscribe today. Click the link in the description to enter. It's LockedOnDaily.com. Let's get to some of our listener questions here. This one comes from Flavio via our Locked On Heat Insider community, who writes in my opinion, we will be a better team next year. This year, to make a good run of the playoffs, it'll be difficult. Isn't it better for us to get our lottery pick this year? Next year, we might not even be in the lottery conversation. What are your thoughts? So a couple of different things here. The lottery part of this, Miami, if they miss the playoffs, they keep their pick this year. If they make the playoffs, the pick, they lose their pick this year, but and then it rolls over. So I think that's a fair thing to say is, hey, if you think that this is going to be the worst of the 2 years, maybe it just makes more sense to keep your pick this year because it'll be a better pick. I think that's totally fair. That leads to that first part of the question, though. Will the Heat be better next year in the regular season? I think is the most important part of that. I tend to think so, David. I do. I don't know whether or not that means they'll be able to avoid the play-in tournament and get a top 6 seed in the playoffs, but I also don't think that they'll be finishing a second straight year under 500 either.
I'm not so sure. I don't think the Cavaliers are going to get any worse. I don't think the Celtics are going to get it worse either. The Knicks have had their injury issues. The Pacers don't seem like they're going to drop off. The Bucks, they had a really strange season. They started off badly, obviously. They had some injury issues. They made some trades. And yet they're still there in the 5th seed. And the Pistons are a young team. The Magic, I can't expect them to get struck by lightning twice the way that they did this year with injuries and everything else like that. So what's the realistic ceiling for this team? Unless they get a significant infusion of talent, i.e. a superstar, maybe even Kevin Durant, or somebody along those lines. Like I don't know that whatever rookie they draft is going to be a significant impact player. And while I expect the core, if you see the core of Andrew Wiggins, Bam Adebayo, and Tyler Herro probably being much more comfortable and maybe even being slightly better, because you don't expect Bam to be as poor to start next season as he was this year. I don't know what kind of a leap Tyler can make beyond what he's already shown us this year. Like maybe it's just a matter of being consistent, as you said. Maybe he's going to be more, closer to being that 25 to 27 point per game scorer on a more regular basis, and you can count on him being your number one option offensively, and then everybody else kind of figures out their role. Like that all bodes well for Miami. I think their record will be better than it was this year. I also don't know whether that is going to translate into a rise in the standings, because again, I think other teams in the East are either going to stay the course or continue to get better, and they're young enough to do so. Now, injuries can't be predicted. One loss, let's say let's say Donovan Mitchell gets hurt.
No,
what happens with the Cavs?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I are saying the same thing, though, right? Maybe they stay in the play-in mix. I just think they'll have a better record. I mean, they were 10 games over 500 last year and in the play-in mix, right? So
41 and 41, 42 and 41, 42 and 40.
No, I think they'll be pretty comfortably over 500. I don't think the bottom of the East. I think the bottom of the East is still going to just be cupcake and record fodder. And here's the thing that I don't think enough people are talking about. They're not going to have the emotional drain of the Jimmy Butler thing weighing on this team for 3 months of the season like it was for this year. I mean, even when Jimmy Butler started finally saying stuff publicly, was about a month. I mean, this locker room had been dealing with it basically from the beginning of the season. Make no mistake about it. And so no wonder they got off to a weird start. No wonder it was really strange for this group. I look ahead in the Eastern Conference, though, to kind of take your view of the Eastern Conference standings here. I think there's 4 teams next year that I have locked into the 4 spots next year. Cleveland, Boston, New York, Indiana. I don't think those teams are going anywhere. Right. I think Boston could get a little bit worse if they have to sell off one of these pieces, but not materially worse to the point where they're going to be tumbling down the standings. Sure. I have no idea what to expect with Milwaukee. I don't even know if Giannis is going to be playing there next year. Like, who knows, right? I don't think anybody can confidently say they know what's going to happen with the Bucks. Detroit, love Detroit. Feel good story of the season. I don't know that they're going to end up being a top 6 seed again, right? Like that's a team that could easily fall back into the play-in mix.
Why? Why would you assume that from a team that has Cade Cunningham, a rising superstar, and like is it young and talented? Like I mean, they lost Jordan Ivey, and they've managed to somehow stay the course and be pretty damn good.
They're good. They're 43 and 36. Like, what if Orlando pops? What if Miami pops? Like, those teams could easily kind of shove Detroit into the play-in mix. It doesn't mean that they're bad, but you look at the Western Conference, there's 7 legitimately good teams. One of them is just going to have to end up in the play-in tournament. So, I mean, we're talking about maybe a game or 2 could be the difference in the standings, but I'm not going to put the Pistons in Sharpie, in the top 6 in the East next year. And then you've got Orlando. Yeah, they should have a bounce back year, but they have their own questions offensively and what they're. So I don't know. The point is, I think that the 5-6 range is doable for the Heat. I think they can get there. They weren't that far off last year. I know there's no Jimmy Butler anymore, but there's also no Jimmy Butler emotional hangover either. So I think this team will be better next year, even if this is basically the team next year. And then, of course, you always let that caveat, do they acquire a superstar and get closer to being a 50-win team? I think that's certainly possible too. So yeah, I think the Heat will be better next year.
I think it's a must. I just you could make the argument before that Jimmy was that star, or at least he was capable of being that star in playoff situations, and that's maybe that was enough. And you had hoped for a rise from Bam and Tyler. Well, you got that rise, and here you are nonetheless. A few games under 500. You need to get that 1A. You need to get that 1A, and I don't know how realistic it is, but yeah. It's a must for this team.
That sounds like maybe a theme for a podcast in the future. Some trade targets, off-season targets, 1A targets. But that will do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.